The Brazen Bull was a torture and execution device that was designed in ancient Greece. Paralus of Athens invented and proposed it to be a new way of executing criminals. The bull was said to have been made entirely of hollow bronze with a door in either the side or the top. According to legend, the Brazen Bull was designed in the form and actual size of a bull and had acoustic apparatus that converted screams into the sound of a bull. The condemned were locked inside the device and a fire was set under it, heating the metal until the person inside died painfully from their bodies roasting to death. This form of torture was very popular in both medieval Germany and in ancient China. In this method, a metal case of rats would be placed on the victim's stomach and slowly heated, causing the rats to become distressed as they started to get hotter and hotter. To escape, they would gnaw down through the stomach and out of the back of whoever was unlucky enough to endure this torture. The rack is easily one of the most recognised torture methods from medieval Europe. The victim would be led down on the rack and their ankles and wrists tied to the device, while two executioners cranked the rack's gears. Slowly, the machine would pull on the victim's limbs in opposite directions, breaking and dislocating bones before eventually being pulled apart. One gruesome aspect was the loud popping noises made by snapping cartilage, ligaments, and bone. Given his name, it should come as no surprise that this was the most favoured method of torture and execution by Vlad the Impaler in 15th century Romania. The victim was forced to sit atop a sharp and thick pole, and the pole was then raised upright, as the victim was left to slide down the pole with their own weight. It could take up to 3 days to die using this method, and it has been said that Vlad once did this to 20,000 people, all while he enjoyed a meal. Although there are many variations of this torture device, the thumbscrew or pillywinks all function the same. They were designed to slowly crush not only fingers and toes, but larger devices were also used to crush knees and elbows. There was also the head crusher, which could do the same for skulls. Its primary intention was to extract confessions from victims, and it was first used in medieval times. One of the most notorious forms of torture, this device looks like an oversized pair of scissors. It could effortlessly cut the victim's tongue. The mouth would be forced open, and then the iron Tounge Tearer would uncomfortably twitch the tongue with its rough grippers. Once a firm hold was maintained, the screw would be firmly tightened, and the victim's tongue would be roughly torn out. Also known as the Judas chair, it was a terrible, intimidating torture device that was added into dungeons during the Middle Ages. Being used until 1800s in Europe, this chair was layered with between 500 to 1,500 spikes on every surface, with straps to restrain its victims tightly. Made of iron, it could also contain spaces for heating elements beneath the seat. It was often used to scare people into giving confessions as they watched others being tortured on the device. Also known as the Catherine wheel, this is a torture device used to slowly kill the victim. First, the victim's limbs were tied to spokes of a large wooden wheel, which would then be slowly revolved as the torturer smashed the victim's limbs with a large iron hammer to break them in numerous places. As the bones are broken, the victims would be left on top of the wheel to die, or could be placed on top of a tall pole so the birds could feed on their flesh while still alive. This process was slow and would often take days, often dying from dehydration. Sometimes a coup de grace or blow of mercy was employed by the executioner to the victim's chest and stomach to end their agony and suffering. One of the torture devices used during the Spanish Inquisition, this is probably one of the most gruesome of them all. The victim is put astride, naked on a donkey-like apparatus, which is actually a vertical wooden board with a sharp V-wedge on top of it. Once the victim was on top, a torturer would add varying weights to the victim's feet until finally the wedge sliced right through the victim's body. During medieval times, the penalty for high treason in England was to be hanged, drawn and quartered in public, and although it was abolished in 1814, it was responsible for the deaths of thousands of people. In this torture technique, the victim is dragged in a wooden frame called a hurdle to the place of execution. They would then be hanged by the neck for a short period of time until they are near death, followed by disembowelment and castration, where the entrails and genitalia were burned in front of them. The victim would then be beheaded and the body quartered into 4 separate parts.